"Return what isn't yours, Venus," my stepmother Judith screamed, her voice echoing through the grand ballroom. "You stole my daughter's birthright." The crystal chandelier lights seemed to dim as every face in the room turned to stare at me. My heart pounded in my chest as I stood frozen, champagne glass nearly slipping from my fingers. "My name is Venus Carter, and I'm a 31-year-old pianist who never expected to be running my father's manufacturing company. Just 1 hour earlier, I had walked into the Westbrook Hotel ballroom for Judith's 55th birthday gala, genuinely hoping to mend fences. It had been a year since my father's passing, and the tension between us was suffocating. When her invitation arrived last week, I thought perhaps she was finally ready to move forward. I couldn't have been more wrong. This wasn't an olive branch, it was an ambush. "That company belonged in Pamela's hands," Judith continued, stalking toward me as whispers rippled through the crowd. "Your father built that business for his children, and you manipulated him when he was sick." I scanned the room desperately, looking for a friendly face among the sea of Houston's business elite. These were people I'd been working with for months, clients, suppliers, community leaders who had seemed to respect me. Now they stared with a mixture of shock and growing disapproval. "That's not what happened," I said, but my voice sounded small even to my own ears. Dad's will was clear. He wanted his real daughter to have the company. Judith cut me off. Not his piano-playing charity case who barely visited him. The tears welled up in my eyes as her words hit their mark. I had toured professionally for years, and yes, I hadn't been home as much as I should have. The guilt was something I lived with daily, but hearing it thrown at me publicly was devastating. Behind Judith stood my stepsister Pamela, a smug smile playing at her lips. She'd never shown any interest in the business while Dad was alive, but now she nodded along to every word her mother spoke. "She's right, you know," someone murmured from a nearby table. "I always thought it was strange how she suddenly appeared when Thomas got sick," another voice added. The room seemed to close in around me as more voices joined the chorus. Someone actually booed. Within minutes, the whispers had become a wave of open hostility. "I think you should leave," Judith said, her voice now calm with the confidence of someone who knew she'd won. "Nobody wants a thief at this celebration." As I walked toward the exit, legs trembling beneath me, one thought crystallized in my mind. I would not let this stand. Not tonight. Not ever. I made it to my car before the tears finally came. Sitting in the dark parking lot, I clutched the steering wheel as sobs racked my body. The humiliation burned through me like acid. These weren't just random people. They were Houston's business community, people whose respect I'd worked tirelessly to earn over the past year. My father, Thomas Carter, had built Carter Manufacturing from nothing over 40 years. He'd married Judith when I was 15, bringing her and 12-year-old Pamela into our lives after my mother's death. While Dad was alive, Judith had played the role of supportive wife, but everything changed after he was diagnosed with cancer 3 years ago. I remember sitting beside his hospital bed as he held my hand. "Venus," he'd said, his voice weak but determined. "You have a mind for business that Pamela doesn't. She's smart, but she doesn't care about Carter Manufacturing. You do. I've seen how you analyze everything, how you understand what makes things work." He'd squeezed my hand then. "I'm leaving the company to you, and I need you to promise you'll take care of it." I had given up my touring career to honor that promise. At first, when the will was read, Judith and Pamela had seemed to accept his decision. But within weeks, the undermining began, subtle at first, then increasingly overt. Tonight was just the public culmination of a year-long campaign to discredit me. As I wiped my tears, my phone buzzed with a text from Bernard Wesley, my father's longtime attorney and the executor of his will. "Just heard what happened. Are you okay? Call me." I dialed immediately, my voice still shaky as I recounted the evening's events. "This is unacceptable," Bernard said, his familiar baritone filled with indignation. "Judith knows perfectly well that your father was of sound mind when he made that will. We have video of him explaining his decisions, She's contested the will 3 times and lost every appeal. They all believe her, Bernard, I whispered. Everyone in that room thinks I'm some manipulative thief. There was a pause, and then Bernard asked the question that would change everything. Do you have your laptop with you? It's in my trunk, I replied, confused by the sudden shift. Good. Meet me at my office in 30 minutes. If Judith wants to make this public, then let's give the public the full story. Every document, every court filing, every piece of evidence your father left to protect you from exactly this scenario. For the first time since fleeing the ballroom, I felt something beyond humiliation, a spark of determination igniting in my chest. I'll be there in 20, I said, starting the engine. Bernard's office was still lit when I pulled into the parking lot of the glass and steel building downtown. He buzzed me in immediately, and I found him surrounded by stacks of binders and files. I've been organizing these since your father passed, he explained, gesturing to the neatly labeled documents. Thomas knew Judith might try something like this. He was strategic that way, always thinking several moves ahead. As Bernard pulled files, I paced the office, anger gradually replacing my earlier shame. I don't understand why she'd do this publicly. She's already contested the will and lost. What does she hope to gain? Bernard looked up, his gray eyes serious. Control. Judith has always been about appearances and social standing. If she can't get the company legally, she'll try to make your position untenable by turning the business community against you. She's succeeding, I muttered, remembering the hostile stares. Not for long, Bernard replied, sorting documents into new piles. Your father documented everything. The multiple times Pamela stated she had no interest in the business. The management courses he encouraged you to take remotely while you were touring. The weekend strategy sessions you two had whenever you were home. He handed me a USB drive. This contains video testimony from your father explaining his decision. He recorded it 3 months before he passed, specifically to prevent Judith from challenging his competency. I clutched the drive, remembering that day. Dad had been so weak, but his mind remained razor-sharp. While I'd known about this recording, I hadn't had the heart to watch it since his death. There's more, Bernard continued. Financial records showing how you've grown the company by 22% since taking over. Employee testimonials about how you prevented layoffs when the Anderson contract fell through. The board meeting minutes where you proposed giving Pamela a director position, which she declined because it involved too much boring paperwork. A plan began forming in my mind. Bernard, is that color printer of yours still lightning fast? He smiled, understanding dawning on his face. Indeed it is, and I have plenty of binders. For the next hour, we worked side by side, organizing irrefutable documentation that told the true story of Carter Manufacturing's succession. Bernard printed copies of court decisions, financial statements, and employee letters. I organized them into presentation binders, one for each table at the gala. As we worked, Bernard made calls to 3 of his associates who agreed to meet us at the hotel. These respected attorneys would lend additional credibility to our presentation. This isn't just about clearing your name tonight, Bernard said as we finished. This is about securing your position permanently. After this, Judith won't be able to undermine you again. I checked my watch just past 10 p.m. The gala would still be in full swing. You know, I said, loading the binders into Bernard's SUV. My father always told me that in business, you don't just defend yourself when attacked. You respond with such overwhelming evidence that your opponent regrets ever questioning you in the first place. Bernard smiled. He would be proud of you tonight. I took a deep breath. Let's go. The drive back to the Westbrook Hotel was silent, my nervous energy filling the car as Bernard navigated through downtown Houston's Saturday night traffic. The binders sat in the back seat, each one containing what felt like my entire life. My father's wishes, my hard work, my legitimacy. Remember, Bernard said as we pulled up to the valet stand, you're not just Thomas Carter's daughter tonight. You're the CEO of Carter Manufacturing. We unloaded the SUV, Bernard's 3 colleagues joining us at the entrance. The four attorneys in their impeccable suits created a powerful visual, like a legal fortress around me. The same doorman who had watched me flee in tears now stepped aside with wide eyes. My heart hammered as we approached the ballroom doors. Inside, the gala appeared to be continuing as if nothing had happened. Crystal glasses clinked, expensive perfume hung in the air, and the string quartet played a familiar waltz. The moment I stepped through the doorway, however, a hush fell over the nearest tables. The silence spread like a wave as heads turned and conversations died. Judith stood near the cake display, champagne flute in hand, looking triumphant. When she spotted me, her smile vanished. Pamela, beside her, grabbed her mother's arm, whispering urgently. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bernard announced, his authoritative voice carrying across the room. "Please excuse the interruption. My name is Bernard Wesley, longtime counsel to Thomas Carter and executor of his estate. I believe there has been some misunderstanding about Carter Manufacturing that needs clarification." The quartet stopped playing. Every eye in the room fixed on us. Earlier this evening, serious accusations were made against Venus Carter, the rightful CEO of Carter Manufacturing, Bernard continued. As officers of the court, my colleagues and I are here to present the legal and factual record. My legs trembled slightly as we moved forward. The attorneys began distributing binders to each table while I walked directly to the small stage where the quartet sat. One of the musicians handed me the microphone. "2 hours ago, I was accused of stealing my father's company," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "I was called a thief and a manipulator. I was booed and humiliated in front of all of you." I paused, scanning the room. Some guests looked down, unable to meet my gaze. Others appeared confused, opening the binders with furrowed brows. My stepmother, Judith Carter, orchestrated that scene. What she didn't tell you is that she has contested my father's will 3 times in court. I nodded to Bernard, who projected the court documents onto the large screen behind me. She lost each time because my father's wishes were explicit and legally binding. Judith started moving toward me, but 2 of Bernard's colleagues stepped smoothly into her path. "Before you hear from me," I continued, "I'd like you to hear from my father." Bernard connected the USB drive to the sound system. The screen flickered, and then my father appeared, gaunt but clear-eyed, sitting in his study at home. The room fell into complete silence as my father's image appeared on screen. Despite his illness, he sat straight in his leather chair, his once robust frame now thin, but his eyes still sharp with intelligence. Several people gasped. Some hadn't seen how ravaged he'd become in his final months. "My name is Thomas Carter," he began, his voice raspy but firm. "I'm recording this statement on March 15th of last year, in the presence of my attorney Bernard Wesley and Dr. Catherine Wilson, who has certified my mental competence." The camera panned briefly to show both professionals before returning to my father. "I am the founder and CEO of Carter Manufacturing. After considerable thought and planning, I have decided to leave controlling interest in my company to my daughter, Venus Carter." Dad shifted slightly, wincing with discomfort before continuing. "I want to address why I've made this decision, as I anticipate it may cause conflict after I'm gone." His gaze seemed to look directly at Judith, even though he couldn't have known she would be watching this recording at her birthday gala a year later. Venus has demonstrated both the acumen and passion needed to lead Carter Manufacturing. Despite her career as a pianist, she has spent countless hours learning the business, analyzing our operations, and understanding our industry. She has completed business courses at my suggestion and has shown remarkable aptitude for strategic planning. The video cut to clips of me at the factory with Dad, reviewing blueprints, meeting with clients, moments I hadn't even realized were being recorded. My stepdaughter Pamela has been offered various opportunities to involve herself in the company over the years, but has consistently declined. When directly asked, she has stated, and I quote, "I have no interest in spending my life making boring industrial parts." The video then showed Pamela at a family dinner, rolling her eyes and saying those exact words, followed by her declining a management training position during a recorded meeting in Dad's office. "I love both my daughters," Dad continued. but a business must be led by someone who loves it. Venus has that love. I am of sound mind and body in making this decision. Dr. Wilson appeared on screen, confirming Dad's mental competence with her credentials displayed below her name. The video ended with my father looking directly at the camera. I trust Venus to protect my legacy and the livelihoods of everyone at Carter Manufacturing. As the screen went dark, I looked around the room. Many guests were now paging through the binders, expressions of shock and dismay replacing their earlier judgment. Since taking over, I said into the microphone, Carter Manufacturing has increased revenue by 22%. We've expanded into 2 new markets, added 17 jobs, and avoided any layoffs despite losing the Anderson contract. I nodded toward Bernard, who displayed the financial charts on screen. On page 12 of your binders, you'll find letters from our employees, many of whom have worked for my father for decades, expressing their support for my leadership. I took a deep breath before continuing. Page 15 contains the formal job offer extended to Pamela 3 months ago. A director position with significant authority, but less day-to-day operational responsibility. She declined via email, stating she had better things to do than waste time in a factory. I could see Pamela's face reddening as several guests turned to look at her. The final section, I said, my voice growing stronger, contains the court decisions rejecting Judith's challenges to my father's will. 3 different judges found no evidence of manipulation or undue influence. The medical reports confirmed Dad was fully competent when making his decision. I stepped forward, placing the microphone down for a moment, as I looked directly at Judith, who stood frozen near the cake display. You asked me to return what isn't mine, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. But as these documents prove beyond any doubt, Carter Manufacturing is exactly where my father wanted it to be, in my hands. I picked up the microphone again, turning back to address the entire room. I understand many of you were misled tonight. You heard one side of a complicated story and reacted based on incomplete information. I paused, letting my gaze sweep across the ballroom. I don't blame you for that. What I do ask is that you take the time to review the evidence in front of you before making further judgments. The atmosphere in the room had transformed. The hostility was gone, replaced by discomfort and embarrassment. Gregory Thompson, the CEO of our largest client, stood up from his table. Venus, I owe you an apology, he said, his voice carrying across the room. I should have known better than to accept such serious accusations without question. His public acknowledgement seemed to break a dam. Other guests began flipping more intently through the binders, murmuring among themselves. Someone at a back table started slowly applauding, and others gradually joined in. Judith finally broke through the attorney's blockade, storming toward me with Pamela trailing behind her. How dare you? She hissed, her voice low but venomous. This is my birthday celebration, and you've turned it into a corporate presentation. This is exactly why Thomas should never have left you the company. You have no class, no sense of propriety. I smiled calmly, knowing every eye in the room was on us. Interesting perspective, Judith, considering you used your own birthday party to publicly accuse me of theft and have me thrown out. You manipulated him when he was dying, Pamela interjected, her voice shaking with anger. You were barely even around. Bernard stepped forward, tablet in hand. Actually, the visitor logs from the hospital and hospice facility show that Venus visited your father 83 times during his final 6 months. Based on these same records, Pamela, you visited 12 times. Mrs. Carter, you visited 37 times. Pamela's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The company was supposed to secure our future, Judith finally said, dropping all pretense. Thomas promised me we would always be taken care of. And you are, I replied firmly. Dad's will provided generously for both of you. The trusts he established ensure you'll never have financial concerns. I lowered my voice so only they could hear. What he didn't do was give you control of his life's work, because he knew what would happen to it if he did. Judith's face contorted with rage. For a moment, I thought she might strike me. Instead, she grabbed Pamela's arm and began pulling her toward the exit. This isn't over, she threw over her shoulder. Actually, it is, Bernard called after her. Any further legal challenges will be considered vexatious litigation and will seek sanctions. As they disappeared through the doors, the tension in the room visibly deflated. Guests began approaching me, offering apologies and congratulations on the company's success. Some admitted they had always found Judith's version suspicious, but hadn't felt comfortable speaking up. Edward Winters, the former CFO who had worked with my father for 20 years before retiring, made his way to my side. "Thomas was right about you," he said, squeezing my hand. "You've got his backbone. He used to say you had your mother's talent but his head for business." Tears pricked at my eyes, but they weren't tears of humiliation this time. "Thank you, Edward. That means everything to me." As the evening continued, I found myself surrounded by support instead of scorn. Bernard stood nearby, satisfaction evident in his smile. The attorneys began collecting the binders. They had served their purpose. "What now?" Bernard asked as the party gradually returned to normal. I looked around at the room full of Houston's business elite, many of whom would be crucial to Carter Manufacturing's future success. "Now," I said, straightening my shoulders, "I network. After all, I'm not just Thomas Carter's daughter tonight. I'm the CEO of Carter Manufacturing." 6 months have passed since Judith's disastrous birthday gala. That evening marked a turning point, not just in how the business community viewed me, but in how I viewed myself. Walking back into that ballroom with evidence and truth had transformed me in ways I'm still discovering. Carter Manufacturing has flourished beyond even my most optimistic projections. After the gala, several guests approached me with new business opportunities. Gregory Thompson's company doubled their order, and 3 former clients who had been wavering returned with long-term contracts. Our workforce has grown by 32 employees, and we've expanded to a second facility in Austin. The aftermath for Judith and Pamela wasn't what anyone expected. 2 weeks after the gala, Pamela showed up at my office unannounced. She sat across from me, nervously twisting her hands. "I need a job," she said bluntly. "Mom's gone through most of her personal savings on those legal challenges, and my trust from Dad doesn't fully mature for another 3 years." I studied my stepsister's face, searching for deception but finding only desperation. "Why come to me, especially after everything that happened?" "Because," she admitted reluctantly, "you're the only one who's actually succeeding. Everyone else in Mom's social circle is just pretending." Against Bernard's advice, I offered Pamela an entry-level position in our marketing department. To my surprise, she accepted, and even more surprisingly, she's shown genuine aptitude for the work. We're not friends, and perhaps we never will be, but there's a growing professional respect between us. Judith, on the other hand, left Houston shortly after the gala. She moved to Phoenix, where she's reportedly pursuing a new wealthy widower. Our paths haven't crossed since, and I doubt they will anytime soon. My personal life has undergone equally significant transformations. For years, music had been my identity. The piano, my constant companion through childhood loneliness after Mom died, through the awkward blending of families when Dad married Judith, through the grueling schedule of conservatory and touring. When Dad got sick and I stepped away from performing, I thought I was just taking a temporary break. But running Carter Manufacturing has awakened something unexpected in me. The challenge of leadership, the satisfaction of creating jobs and solving problems, these things fulfill me in ways I never anticipated. I still play piano, usually late at night when the day's work is done, but my relationship with music has evolved into something more personal and less performative. Last month, I did something Dad would have loved. I established the Thomas Carter Foundation, dedicated to bringing music education to underprivileged schools across Texas. The foundation also provides business mentorship to young entrepreneurs, combining both sides of my life into something meaningful. At our launch event, I performed publicly for the first time since taking over the company, playing my father's favorite Chopin nocturne on a grand piano we'd brought into the factory. As I played among the machines my father had built, surrounded by the employees whose livelihoods he had secured and I now protected, I felt his presence more strongly than I had since his death. I realized that inheritance isn't just about assets and ownership. It's about carrying forward the best parts of those we've lost while adding our own unique contributions. The business community that once booed me now points to Carter Manufacturing as a model of innovation and ethical leadership. The company thrives, Pamela is finding her way, and I've discovered a new harmony between the artist I was and the businesswoman I've become. Dad was right all along. Some legacies aren't stolen, they're earned.